After Germany won World War II, the State of Burgundy was created in former French and Belgian lands to appease Himmler and the SS. In 1964, Himmler decided to open up Burgundy to the world and started diplomatic relations with other countries following his same ideology, like Komi and the Reichskommissariat Caucasian. In 1967, an Act of Union is signed by these three nations, forming the US of BS. The Papal State expanded in Italy with the help of France through the centuries. In the 19th century, the Papal State helped Prussia in both the Brother War and the Franco-Prussian War, betraying their century-old alliance with France. After an intervention in the Spanish Civil War, the Vatican Empire annexed Catalonia and the Balearic Islands, becoming the main power of the Mediterranean, and from there controlled much of the Catholic world through religious and economic influence. In this timeline, Hitler is assassinated before getting into power, and Strasser becomes the leader of the National Socialist Party, together with the Goebbels. When they get elected, the party under Strasser transforms from National Socialist to National Bolshevik, and many more socialist economic plans are put in effect under Strasser in Germany. But their nationalistic and expansionistic policies remain. In World War II, instead of betraying the Soviets, Germany allies with them, partitioning Poland and Baltics. In the West, Germany still invades France but doesn't ally Italy, which remains neutral in the war. After a swift invasion of Scandinavia and the support from the Soviets, a peace treaty not too harsh on the Allies is drafted, making Germany and the Soviets the leaders of Europe, with all their territorial claim fulfilled. In 1952, Strasser dies and Goebbels takes power. When the Reconquista started, Iberia was divided in many different Christian duchies and kingdoms in the north, and a unified and Islamic south. As the Reconquista progressed, the people on the Atlantic coast of northwestern Iberia developed a separate identity based on the Germanic people that conquered the area after the fall of Rome, the Suebians. This kingdom would help the Navarrans and Aragonese fight off the Muslims in the centuries, and conducted its own naval invasion and slow conquest of southwest Morocco in the 14th century, becoming a pluricontinental country. In the age of exploration, the kingdom of Porto Suebia colonized the northern coast of South America, exporting their culture and language to millions of natives and settlers. Today, the kingdom remains a wealthy country in Europe, and a link between Europe and Africa. In this universe, the Turks win the Turkish War of Independence slower but on a bigger scale, getting much of northern Syria and Iraq back from the European empires. They also push further into the Italian and Greek-controlled territories in the west of Anatolia. After the Independence War is over, they intervene in the Russian Civil War, seizing part of the Caucasus. Differently from our timeline where Turkey was made into a nation-state, in this one they accept ethnic diversity and multiculturalism, creating autonomous regions for Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Lads, Syrians, Alawites, Pontic Greeks and Zazags, and various regional identities, making Turkey into a diverse but united secular republic. The Burks dynasty of the Maya realm in Western Ireland started unifying the island in the 14th century through royal marriages and wars of conquest. By the 1500s, they had unified most of the island and raised the biggest army Ireland had ever seen, and fought the English in the First Anglo-Irish War. The war ended in a stalemate, but confirmed Irish unification and let them remain independent. Through multiple royal marriages, Scotland fell into a personal union with Ireland in the 1600s, and then, in 1634, an Act of Union between the two kingdoms was signed, forming the Celtic Union, calling back to the shared ethnic origins. The future centuries of the Celtic Union would see them colonize almost a quarter of the world, and gain numerous other Celtic territories in Europe. Today, the Celtic Union remains a strong monarchy and one of the most influential states in Europe. The Hellenic Republic is formed after a republican revolution overthrew the millennia-old Byzantine Empire under the influence of the French Revolution. The Hellenic Republic is greatly unstable due to their multiple ethnic minorities, but remains a beacon of liberty and democracy in the Balkans and the Middle East. Italian Greece has been a puppet state of the Italian Empire since World War II. Their king has been replaced with a family member of the Savoy dynasty, and Greece has become wealthier through trade in the Mediterranean and the elimination of all Greek debts from the Italian crown. but the country is smaller and full of corruption since the end of the war. The Illyrian tribes of the Adriatic coast expanded into Italian and Dalmatian regions before the Roman Republic can consolidate its holdings and crush all Italic, Greek and Celtic tribes near them. They unify into a loose confederation of Illyrian tribes and start a process of Illyrization on their conquered peoples. The Socialist Balkan Federation was formed with Josip Broz Tito as head of state after the Second World War, when the entire area was occupied by either the Yugoslav communist partisans or the Red Army. First, it was only the union of the previously known Kingdom of Yugoslavia and the Bulgarian Tsardom, but then Dobruja was given by Romania in exchange of the Soviets granting them Moldova back. Following the partition of Austria and Germany, Carinthia, a southern region of Austria inhabited by Slovenes, was given to the Federation instead of the Republic of Austria, and then Stalin pushed Albania to join the Federation under a threat of invasion, granting them linguistic and religious rights. In the south, the Greek Civil War was starting to be lost by the communists, so they asked the Federation to annex all the territories they have occupied so that they would be safe. In the 1960s, Turkey got into a terrible civil war, and the Federation took the opportunities to seize Thrace from them. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the Federation became capitalist and democratized. Although sometimes divided by their numerous languages and cultures, the Federation remains to this day one of the most important countries in Eastern Europe. The Swedish-Ottoman Union was formed after these two hegemonic empires fought in the Great War. Due to the chaos and destruction that the war caused, their post-war leaders decided to unite the two countries to assure peace and prosperity in the nation's futures and their hegemony over the continents. The Sealand-British War ends in Sealander victory, causing Sealand to rise through the decades and easily becoming the strongest nation in Europe. In World War II, the fascist Iron Guard gets overthrown by a pro-monarchy military government that expels the Nazis from the country and becomes neutral. The only reason the National Socialists or the Communists don't invade back is because they refuse to spend time on such an insignificant part of the war. After the war, the military junta remains in power, forming a military dictatorship with King Michael as a figurehead. To this day, the military junta, now mostly composed of old men, remains in power and continues to make Romania a completely isolated state in Europe, akin to North Korea. Seeing the encroachment of the Russian Cossacks into western Siberia, the peoples of Siberia, spearheaded by the Nenets, formed a union of western Siberian chiefdoms to repel the Russian invaders. Throughout the centuries, the union fought many times against the Russians and ended up owning most of eastern Siberia and Mongolia. Today, the Union remains as the biggest rival to Russia, that has since directed its attention westwards, owning Ruthenia and the Baltics. The British Empire collapsed following the German victory in World War II. This caused many of the colonies to either be annexed by the winners of the conflict or just to become independent. One of the exceptions is the United Kingdom of Tanganyika and Yasaland, where the British government and monarchy had escaped to after the end of the war. This country, although still segregated when it comes to race, remains one of the only semi-democracies in Africa. Las Filipinas are the result of a more heavily Spanish-invested Philippines. In this timeline, Spain gets to Taiwan and northern Borneo before other colonial powers, and establishes a separate dominion called Las Filipinas. More Spanish settlement is encouraged into the islands, and more economic investment is put into them. In 1898, a rebellion supported by the United States occurs in the archipelago, resulting in Filipino independence. Today, Las Filipinas is one of the richest and most successful countries in Asia, and considers itself bilingual, with Spanish and Filipino being on the same level of importance. In 1958, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and the Hashemite Kingdom of Iraq unite in the Arab Union, facilitated by their shared dynasty. Unfortunately, this causes much distress to the population of the two countries, causing an insurgency in the Kurdish north, and the final separation of the two realms only 8 months later. In In the age of imperialism, the colonial powers started encroaching into Asia and almost conquered Japan in a colonial partition war, so the Chinese and Koreans intervened and helped the Japanese liberate themselves. This caused the free nations to feel more united than ever, and as the colonial powers prepared for another war of conquest, the three nations united under a single government, remaining the only power in Asia free of colonization. Today, the state of Eastern Asia is a liberal democracy and one of the two global superpowers, with their population being the largest in the world and their economy surpassing every nation in the world. In this timeline, Simón Bolívar doesn't die as early as he did in our timeline, and when Venezuela declares independence from Gran Colombia, he agrees on it, but makes it so that they would remain into a federation. Due to multiple economic crises happening in the rest of Latin America, throughout the 19th century, multiple countries joined the Federation, like Peru and Bolivia. In the Second World War, the Federation helps the Allies massively in their war efforts, even entering officially in 1941 on the United States side. For its help, at the end of the war, the Federation is granted the Guyanas. Today, the Federation of Venezuela has become the second richest country in the Americas, and is the jewel of Latin America. The new Mexican Empire is the result of the US losing the First World War to Mexico and Germany. Mexico annexes all US territories and other allied lands in the region, and elects a member of the German Hohenzollern dynasty as their emperor.